First thing on the agenda is roll call attendance.
Councilmember Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilmember Mylum.
Here.
Councilmember Byrd.
Here.
Councilmember Roundtree.
Here.
Councilmember Borton.
Here.
Councilmember Zaremba.
Here.
Mayor DeVeard is absent.
And thank you all for being here this evening at our regularly scheduled city council meeting. We've got a number of scouts here. This is kind of like you got a day off from school, but you had to come to City Hall, and that's okay. You had all day to mess around, I suppose. Next thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and Tyler Thompson with Troop 148 has volunteered to lead us this evening. Thank you, Tyler.
All rise. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tyler, come up here. There's a token of appreciation, so you thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Nice job.
Next item is a community invocation. Will be led this evening by Larry Woodard from the 10 Mile Christian Church. Good evening, Larry. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
If you'd all join us in the invocation or take this as a moment of silence.
Okay. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight with thanksgiving for the many blessings you have given us here in Meridian. I especially want to give thanks for our mayor and city council who have led us over the past several years. An atmosphere of let's do what's best for our city seems to pervade this council, and for this we are so thankful. We're also thankful to have city employees, especially our police, firemen, EMTs, sanitation workers who help make this city the best place to live in the United States. I do not want to overlook the other city employees who come to work each day at their desk in planning and parks and city records and so forth, just to keep the wheels running smoothly. We're thankful for our city teachers and faith leaders, commercial businesses, banks that make Meridian #1. Our home today is starting to take on a Thanksgiving air as the turkey is out thawing, dressing is being readied, and in a couple of days our family will gather along with many others around the city for a time of family time, a real time of blessing to see children, grandchildren, in our case, great-grandchildren. What more could we be thankful for here in Idaho? Tonight's issues will come before this council that will require careful consideration, and I ask that this council have wisdom that looks in some cases years ahead. God, we give you thanks for all that we have as a city. We pray for our nation because our news tonight is not comforting. For our servicemen and women who defend our freedoms, we give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Larry. Next item is the adoption of the agenda.
President,
Mr. Byrd.
on the agenda, there is no additions or changes, so I move that we approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Next item is consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Byrd.
I move we approve the consent agenda as published and for the president to sign and the clerk to attest.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
Councilmember Roundtree.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Zaremba.
Aye.
Next item under action items is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing for Paramount Subdivision H-2015-0022. Sonia.
Thank you, President Roundtree, members of the council. The first application before you tonight is a request for a development agreement modification. This site consists of 53.57 acres of land. It's currently zoned CC and TNC and is located on the south side of West Chinden Boulevard, west of North Meridian Road. This site was annexed in 2013 with the Paramount Northeast project. A condition of annexation required the original development agreement for Paramount subdivision to be amended to include this property with a conceptual development plan and associated provisions. The map you see there on the left is the overall boundary for the Paramount subdivision, the red highlighted area, and the map on the right is the area that we're talking about tonight. The applicant is requesting a modification to the existing development agreement as required. A conceptual development plan is proposed for the portion of the site located at the southeast corner of West Chinden Boulevard and North Fox Run Way. Trying to get my slides to catch up here, excuse me. The concept plan does not include the portion of the annexation area at the southwest corner of Chinden and Fox Run. That would be this area over here. The concept plan depicts a detailed plan for an assisted living facility on the west end of the site and future residential uses on the remainder of the site. The type of residential uses are not specified. A circulation plan is shown that depicts 2 access points via North Fox Run Way to the portion of the site proposed to develop with an assisted living facility and 3 other accesses via Director Street, with cross-access between the residential designated areas and the proposed residential care facility. So it's kind of hard to see here, but this area here right at the northwest corner of the site is where the assisted living facility is proposed. And the applicant does have a concurrent conditional use permit application in process right now for that use. A phased 35-foot wide landscape buffer and a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway is also depicted on the concept plan along West Chinden Boulevard with 30 feet of right-of-way, future right-of-way, for a total of 70 feet from center line. Because the proposed concept plan only depicts a general use of residential and does not include a site plan or specific type or density of residential uses, it does not incorporate a mix of 3 different land use types with residential densities ranging from 6 to 15 units per acre, as required in the mixed-use community designated areas, and residential densities ranging from 3 to 8 units per acre in the medium-density residential designated area, and does not include a plan for the land at the southwest corner of Chinden and Fox Run. Staff does recommend that the development agreement is modified in the future prior to any development of this area to include a more detailed concept plan. This will ensure the site develops in accord with the mixed-use community and medium-density residential designations. And I have included a slide here that shows the current zoning of the property on the left and the future land use map designations on the right. If the site is intended to develop with all residential uses as proposed on the concept plan, an amendment to the comprehensive plan may be required if a mix of 3 land use types within the overall MUC area can't be provided. In regard to access, the UDC restricts access to collector streets when access to a local street is available. Local street access is not available to this site. The staff report mistakenly states that West Director Street to the south is a local street. It actually is a future collector street. 2 access points are proposed on the concept plan to the assisted living facility via Fox Run Way, a collector street. And it is really hard to see, but there's like an access right here and right there. Staff is only recommending 1 access is allowed via Fox Run in accord with the UDC access standards unless otherwise waived by City Council. Because this property is not an original parcel of record as defined by the UDC and therefore is not considered a legal parcel to build upon, staff recommends the property is subdivided prior to any development occurring on the site. The concept plan shows a phased landscape buffer and multi-use pathway along Chinden Boulevard. Staff does not recommend approval of the proposed phasing of these items as shown. Typically, sidewalks and pathways are required to be installed with the first phase of development along arterial streets as directed by the mayor and council to provide a safe travel lane for pedestrians. Staff will evaluate the proposed phasing of these improvements at the time of preliminary plat application. However, will most likely require the multi-use pathway along Chinden Boulevard and North Meridian Road to West Director Street to be installed with the first phase of development. Written testimony has been received from Mike Wardle in response to the staff report. Staff is recommending approval of the proposed development agreement modification per the staff report with a change to the development agreement provision 3 as follows. A 10-foot wide multi-use pathway shall be provided within the street buffers along West Chinden Boulevard, along the west side of North Meridian Road, and along the north side of West Director Street within a public use easement in accord with UDC 11-3H 4C4. The public use easement shall be submitted to the city, approved by the city, and recorded prior to issuance of any certificate of zoning compliance or approval of any subsequent land use application for the CC and TNC zoned properties. Staff will stand for any questions the council may have.
Questions?
At this point.
Seeing none? The applicant?
Mr. President, members of the council, Mike Wardle, Brighton Corporation, 12601 West Explorer Drive in Boise. Sonia, if you would put up just the first slide of the item that I provided to you today, unless you need my thumb drive.
You give me your thumb drive?
I brought my thumb drive.
Where's it at?
Check your pocket.
I would be happy to. Oh, you did?
Mr. President, council members, while Sonia's putting this up, just so we get a point of reference, I would just note that, thank you. The area, as identified by Sonia, was annexed and zoned in 2013, just a bit over 2 years ago. So this action is the first step in bringing that property into development. In fact, the proposal, as we'll see in just a moment, actually is a joint venture between the Gardner Company and Brighton Corporation to do an assisted living complex. And we will, in due course, bring forth other applications that will fill in the balance of that property between Fox Runway and Meridian Road. And just for reference, I didn't put these on, but the top obviously is Chinden Boulevard. The south, the soon-to-be completed Director Street, and I appreciate Sonia noting that that is actually also a collector street. Then to the west of the site, North Fox Runway, and on the east, Meridian Road. Let's go to the second slide just to focus in a bit more on the site that we are discussing. And as Sonia noted that not only do we modify the development agreement at this point for this first proposed use, but we will be providing additional detail and modifications of the development agreement in the future. But kind of the little technical thing that we ran into was the need for a subdivision plat. Over the course of time in any major project area, you whittle away on the parcels, and so at this point in time, from a technical perspective, there is no original parcel of record. So we did submit today a preliminary plat for the whole area and a specific final plat for the assisted living complex. So those steps will be taken along with the noted conditional use permit application that will be heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission next Thursday. This was seemingly a simple first step, but it's proven to be a bit more of a challenge, and frankly we have some disagreement with the recommendations that the council has provided to you this evening. And you have on the dais, I believe, a applicant response that's color-coded to help identify the issues that I will discuss in just a moment. Let's go to the third slide, because the third slide actually shows the issue that we are specifically dealing with. And so, to help the council assess the areas of agreement and disagreement, I've taken the liberty to, there were some unnumbered items from the staff report on page 4, and I affixed, for the ease of reference, some references to them as items 1 through 4. And in the first instance, we are fully agreeable with the staff that there will be future development agreement modifications as the areas are detailed beyond the assisted living complex. The item of, the first item of disagreement is item number 2, as noted, which proposes from the staff's perspective only one access to Fox Run Way. The challenge with this is that if in fact there is only one access, there's probably a life safety issue and certainly a circulation issue that will have to be addressed, and we hope that the Planning and Zoning Commission and its deliberations next week will understand this as well. In the future, there will be an access to the east with the additional properties being developed, but until that occurs, there has to be more than one access. And so we have proposed, actually the southerly access is an existing curb cut. The one northerly, which is basically the front door approach to the assisted living complex, is proposed so that there are at least 2 points of access, again, not only for circulation, but also for fire and life safety issues. So we are proposing to, or asking the council to delete staff's proposed requirement that would allow only one access. We understand that the council must consider waivers, and this item will actually come to you again because the conditional use permit approval or recommendation by the City Planning and Zoning Commission will address that question, but only the council can make the ultimate decision. This is kind of a preemptive discussion that we're having then. And so we are proposing that the council affirm that we certainly do need to have 2 access points at the onset of this project. The third item, which is a staff recommends the property be subdivided. As I noted, we have submitted applications for final, preliminary and final plat to get that process started. It's also a bullet point on the next page that I'll just refer to briefly, but we agree in concept that the platting process go forward. There's a qualification that we'll discuss on the next page. With regard to the buffers, let's go on to the next slide, please. Hopefully it did not disappear.
Go. Have any more, Mike?
Really?
Yeah.
Well, with I guess the best of technology, I had sent the slides to staff earlier today, and obviously we've run into a technical issue. Is there anything here that would be possible to show an exhibit?
Do you have paper copies,
I
Mike?
do.
Yes.
Let me just discuss it from, and let's go back to the second slide, Sonia. That will probably give us enough point of illustration. There you go. Thank you. And this relates to staff's recommendation for completing the street buffers along the arterioles and that would be Chinden and Meridian Road, as well as the multi-use pathway and sidewalks and so forth with the first phase, in essence with the assisted living complex. The area along Chinden, the improved area, is 675 feet wide. The actual assisted living complex is 420 feet wide. What we have proposed in the sheet that I provided to you is that the first phase of the project, which is the assisted living, will include the regional pathway 10 feet wide all the way along the fully improved frontage of Chinden as it exists today, which again is 255 feet beyond the project site. But to do more than that at this point would be a serious challenge. Number one, we don't have the adjacent areas fully planned and prepared to know exactly how much fill we would have to bring in to complete that berm. But it just is something that we believe strongly that it needs to be addressed as the project is phased in the future. So going to the second page then, these are the specific bulleted items that staff has proposed on the 5th page of the staff report, again numbered for ease of reference. The first one, the property to be subdivided prior to submittal of a certificate of zoning compliance or issuance of a building permit. We disagree with that for the reason that we cannot go forward with the project. We certainly can't get occupancy until the property has been subdivided, but we believe it's a technical issue. And so what we're proposing to do is to allow the project to move forward with that single-use assisted living complex while the final plat for what is known as Paramount Veranda is being processed and recorded. And so the requested action that we propose in that regard is that the bullet number 1 be modified to read, the property shall be subdivided prior to issuance of an occupancy permit for the assisted living complex. Bullet number 2, again, refers back to item number 2 on page 1, which is the single access from Fox Run Way. We disagree with that and ask council to approve both conceptually, because that still again will come back as a conditional use permit item. Bullet number 3, we concur that the property be developed consistent with the exhibit that we had provided. Number 4.
Mike, excuse me if I may interrupt. I have your presentation if it's not too late, if you want to use it.
Bring it back, please. If and we'll quickly scroll through. We won't take much more time.
On there now.
Technology is wonderful when it works.
You just missed your attachment earlier. Apologize.
So can you go to items? There you go. This is just for reference. This is Fox Run Way looking north toward Chinden. We have the fully improved access to the east of that, adjacent to the assisted living site. We will be adding to that with additional landscape buffering. The next slide then shows the phase 1 veranda to the west, future phases, and then it shows the right-of-way parcel that's being reserved for future widening of Chinden, along then with the 40-foot landscape buffer. And it is that, if you go to the next slide then, that we're proposing to phase. And so the first phase of this project will include the 10-foot regional pathway until we have additional improvements made and a place to physically put that. And then finally, the next slide, the next 2 slides show the fully improved. Go one more and we'll just stop there. We already have actually the plateau established for that sidewalk. It's ready to go. It's just a matter of actually cutting it in and putting the concrete down. So let me just summarize, Mr. President and council members. We are asking that the council concur that there needs to be more than one access for this first phase, and so we're asking for deletion of the staff recommendation in that regard. We're asking to allow the CZC and building permit and construction process to go forward as the single-use subdivision plat for veranda is processed. We're asking that arterial buffer improvements be phased with the development rather than completed with just the first assisted living complex. And then finally, we ask in the last item, bulleted item that staff had proposed, that in the future, when the applications come forward, that the veranda, the assisted living, be considered one of the 3 land use types that has to be considered when the TNC area is zoned in the future or developed in the future. One final comment. If the council has any reservation with the requests that I have placed before you this evening, I'm going to ask for a 1-week deferral. The staff report was received last Friday afternoon when Mr. Turnbull had already left town, and it was forwarded to him. He has concerns, and if it's necessary for him and Mr. Gardner to come and assure the council of the direction and the intent of this proposal, I think it would be appropriate to defer action until they get back and have that opportunity on your meeting next Tuesday. However, if the council agrees with the recommendations, it would be a Thanksgiving surprise that I'd be happy to provide to them in advance, but that would be the council's discretion, certainly. I would be happy to answer your questions and try to clarify if needed.
I have none.
Mr. President, just a couple of comments. The parcel you're talking about is 53, a little over 53.5 acres.
Total.
And I can understand the discussion about one access on a collector or minor arterial, as that is, but visualize 53 acres as being about the size of Settlers Park, to which there are 1, 2, 3, about 5 accesses, I think. I certainly am supportive of the 2 accesses. I think that's fair. I think there'll be further use for the second access in the future, and that one makes sense to me. I would comment on the multi-use pathway as well. When that was written into the UDC that the entire perimeter needed to be landscaped and finished, we were thinking about properties that might eventually have 3, 4 buildings on them. Maybe they were 100 acres or something like that. This project is nearly this entire square mile, if I remember correctly, and I have no problem with making an exception to say you don't need to do that entire square mile perimeter in order to develop this phase. Yes, it will need to be done eventually, but this is not going to connect to a school where we might have school children walking in danger if the sidewalk was not completed yet. And I'm, for one, am supportive of that request as well.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Mike, I have a question on the first slide, if you would.
Or on the first slide.
Okay.
On the east side, your second access or first, however you want to number them, you have a road that follows the east side. It looks like there's envisioned temporary turning circle, but what's the intent? Is that intended to be a frontage road in the future? Or?
Mr. President, council members, I'm going to ask Sonia to go to slide 10, which was not shown at this point. This is a concept that I did in August of this year for that entire area. And this is not before you, but I want you to understand how this all connects. And this is an earlier iteration of the actual footprint of the assisted living complex. So it shows those two same access points, but it also then shows that that roadway that goes around to the back will become a shared roadway. There will be about a 25 to 30 foot buffer behind the assisted living complex landscaped that will be kind of a front door for the depiction. And go one more slide, Sonia, because it's a colored slide that actually shows a little bit better. This is an age-qualified concept, single-story units in a quad configuration that would, again, share that access on the back side of the assisted living, and then have additional access points, potentially 3 to director, which is also a collector, which the council in the future will have to waive the stipulation that there can only be one. But we don't have any choice. We have arterioles on the outside, and the access, the entrance at Fox Run Way is actually at the half-mile boundary, so there are no other conflicts with Chinden Boulevard traffic flow. So that gives you the context of our intent. And if you go back one more slide, Sonia, we are proposing three different types of uses in there. The assisted living, certainly an age-qualified project immediately to the east, and then potentially we're working on a concept for twin homes that would be single-family attached, but in a paired unit, a townhome for the lack of a better term. But so we're talking about kind of a transition from the more active to the folks getting ready for an assisted living in the middle. And we believe that these uses are reasonable and consistent with the intent of the overall Paramount plan. Thank you for the ask.
Another question with respect to the buffer and continuing it across the entire property or phasing it. Is it your intent to have the same or similar type of buffer down Chinden as you have currently? So you'll continue that?
Mr. President, council members, the expectation has always been that the gap between the 675 foot of improved area near Fox Run over to the corner, which is also improved, would be filled with the same character, a very tall berm, some walls, and a great deal of landscaping. That actually puts the depth of the buffer is well beyond the 40 feet that's required. It's probably in the range of 60 to 75 feet, because if you've had the opportunity to drive into Paramount, you'll see that you've got that tall berm fully improved on the outside, and on the inside it extends a considerable distance. And so it will be the same character all the way down that full half mile eventually.
So you would not be opposed to have the DA stipulate that?
That it be the same character? Oh, no, we fully agree with that. We just are concerned about the phasing of it. It's just impractical to do that whole thing at this point in time.
And when you talked about the two accesses to the proposed development, the assisted living facility, it kind of went that, well, maybe if there's access provided in the east in the future, maybe that would provide the additional access. Can I assume from that then you'd be willing to eliminate one of the two that were there initially, or the two are going to stay? What's the situation?
Mr. President, council members, no, I would not at this point in time think that that would necessarily be a good idea, because if you only have the one, it would necessitate potentially, if there was something that occurred, any kind of a conflict with the remaining access, it means that whatever would have to get there, and you're talking potentially emergency vehicles, let's be realistic about an assisted living, they would have to potentially come through that adjacent neighborhood rather than having a more direct access. So I think, again, it's a life safety issue.
That's all the questions I have. Any further questions? Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much.
This is a public hearing, and I have two individuals who have signed up to let their positions be known. Brian Davis. Do you wish to, are you just here for information? Are you for or against?
Yeah, I thought we were signing in.
Because you're here, thank you. And Elizabeth is with you as well?
Same story.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify? Thank you. Any discussion or questions for staff?
Mr. President,
Mr. Byrd?
Sonia, with the applicant's reply, is there anything that stands out that you can't live with, the staff can't live with, or it looks like it's a pretty well thought out reply, and I can't see where their actions is gonna do anything but help, so.
I would, Councilman Byrd, if the council has any strong feelings on the timing of the land use, or excuse me, the street buffers and the pedestrian walkways, I'd certainly like to hear your thoughts on that.
I concur with Councilman Zaremba on that. I think if they if we get the 675-foot phase, while would be nice to have it all, that's quite a bit of area out there to go around, and it's not it's not a walking path for school students or for students or anything like that. So I have no problem with that being in that location, being phased in with the phases that are used. So that, to me, I don't see anything wrong with that.
With the subdivision phases?
Yeah.
Okay, per each phase?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think when you get to a certain phase, then you complete it. And I think the developer.
When you get to the housing.
But the developer would agree to that too.
Okay. Is council, the only other thought I would have is if council is contemplating allowing the applicant, I believe he asked for the allowance to submit a certificate of zoning compliance for the assisted living facility prior to the first phase final plat being recorded. If you intend to do that, they don't have a legal parcel as it sits. I would want to make sure if you do approve that request that the future site plan align with the first phase final plat, the boundaries of the site, so that there's no question on any of the site improvements where they lie. So that would be my only comments. Thank you.
Other questions?
And then also, excuse me, just to confirm the applicant's kind of question on the mix of land uses for this site, staff would consider the residential care facility one mix, one type of use in the mix.
Other questions, comments? Mike, you have any further comments?
Mr. President, council members, actually I have an apology. I got so hung up when I got to the pages 4 and 5 of the staff report, I didn't go on to page 8, which has all of these clearly articulated, so I didn't need to do any renumbering. And so in that regard, I think they're all there. And I got stopped psychologically, so thank you very much. I appreciate the council's consideration, because those are really the three items. The access is sufficient access on Fox Run, phasing of those improvements, and the ability to move this project forward while the final plat is being processed and building permit and other issues are being addressed. Thank you.
Mr. President.
But you do agree that there'll be no occupancy until the final plat is done, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll give you building permits, but you're not occupying.
Yeah, agreed.
Mr. Zaremba?
Just because it appears that this is an 11-page presentation and we've only seen 10 pages, can we see what page 11 is?
Probably says
Well,
the
actually,
end.
page 11 was,
Got it.
you've seen that.
Ah,
Page
okay.
9, go back to page 9, Sonia, so they can, there it is. That's the only one you haven't seen. Thank you.
Thank
Full
you.
disclosure, thank you, Mike. All right, any further comments, questions, directions that you need? I need a motion.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zaremba.
I move we close the public hearing on MDA H2015-0022.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on item 6A. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Signed. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zaremba.
I move we approve MDA H2015-0022 to include first all staff comments and then to include the modifications requested by the applicant.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move forward with approval of this project as stated. All those in favor of the motion signify by
Aye?
aye. Aye. Oh, excuse me, that's a roll call, yeah. Get you on
Thank-
record.
Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum. Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
Councilmember Roundtree.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Zaremba.
Aye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Tell Tommy and David we're sorry they couldn't come and visit, but that's fine. Next item is item 6B, final plat for H 2015-0027.
Application before you is a request for a final plat. This site consists of 15.17 acres of land. It's zoned R4, and it's located at 4345 North Linder Road on the west side of North Linder, south of West McMillan Road. The proposed final plat depicts 35 building lots and 9 common area lots on 15.17 acres of land in the R4 zoning district. All of the lots proposed in this subdivision are for single-family detached homes and comply with the dimensional standards of the R4 zoning district. The proposed final plat is in compliance with the approved preliminary plat. Written testimony has been received from Becky McKay, the applicant's representative, in response to the staff report. Staff is recommending approval per the conditions in the staff report with one modification. In response to the applicant's response, staff recommends site-specific condition number 10 is modified as follows. The applicant shall be required to connect the existing 12-inch water main located in North Linder Road and the 8-inch water mains located within North Marsh Avenue, thereby looping the water system into all available locations. The applicant shall also be required to extend an 8-inch water main to the north boundary of the subdivision in Pengrove Way. Staff will stand for any questions council may have.
Questions for staff?
I have none.
Seeing none.
Mr. President,
Mr. Byrd,
I move we close the pub, oh, wait a minute.
this is the final plat.
I move we approve H 2015-0027 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item 6B.
Thank you. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
Councilmember Roundtree.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Zaremba.
Aye.
Very good. Next item, department reports, is the acceptance and canvassing of the Ada County votes for the November 3rd election. Do we have they're all in the packet. So it's an opportunity for you to find out if you really did vote and if your neighbors voted. You've taken a look, or we'll take a look at those. Once you're satisfied that the election has been properly canvassed. I would need a motion to accept the canvassing. And just a bit of general knowledge, there were 1,025 early voters in our early voting accommodations at City Hall this past year, and that's in a 10-day period. So I think we're the second most used off-site. Benjamin being the first, number one. And, yeah, it was a good turnout.
Mr. President, I do have a question.
Yes.
After the votes were counted originally, then there were some found that they had a recount, is that correct?
They had to count, was it, how many, 8? 28?
Council President
28
Roundtree?
of them.
Yes, they had to recount. They had found 28 votes, and so they canvassed those, and they found that in the canvassing of the votes, that the missing 28
Were really
ballots had gotten packed in a box. And so they counted those, and then it got added to these final results here.
Okay, because I didn't notice the numbers change. They were
Councilmember-
Meridian
The numbers changed from when?
from the original, from the night of the election, or the next day.
I don't have those results, so these were what they sent us after the final canvass, so I don't know.
Okay.
I know there was 28 votes, is what they were counting.
Isn't it possible this is the reported number, and that when they counted them, they were 8 short, so those 8 were verified within the official?
Yeah, it could be they were already there.
That's-
They
that
were
would
already
have been
counted.
my
That's the only thing I was
assumption. They
thinking.
were counted.
I never heard an explanation of, other than they did find them in their canvassing.
Council President Roundtree, if I were to speculate, I would say that if the numbers didn't change, the first numbers probably would have been what they recorded in the poll books.
Correct.
And then they actually count the ballots have to match what's in the poll books, and that's probably how they caught it. So that would be, but I can get that question answered, and I can send out an email that'll even let you know.
Mr. President,
Byrd.
I move that we approve the Ada County's canvass of the votes for the November 3rd, 2015 Meridian City election for 3 council seats and mayor's seat.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to approve the Ada County canvassing of the votes of November 3rd. Is that a roll call?
Yes.
Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
Councilmember Roundtree.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Zaremba.
Aye.
Item 7B, Legal Department, an ordinance of the city repealing and replacing Chapter 15. Official.
It's all the same one. I just wanted to make sure there was enough. I'm going to try to limit my speaking tonight. Mr. President, members of the council, I've got a cold that's not wanting to go away. What I have in front of you is a proposed amendment to our city ordinance. The city of Meridian has had an ordinance for a number of years in regards to discriminatory actions in regards to housing within the city, and that's a requirement by the federal government in regards to receiving HUD funds for public housing within the city of Meridian. There's also a requirement that we have a city ordinance prohibiting discrimination in regards to disabilities within the city. So that ordinance has been on the books for a while. Recently, besides the Civil Rights Act and all the other laws that apply to employment and activities of the city, the Department of Justice and the Ninth Circuit have also included both gender discrimination and gender identity, and sexual orientation as a protected right under the Civil Rights Act. So what we're requesting to do is amend our ordinance to reflect that this ordinance applies to the city in the context of employment, and it applies to the city in the context of activities and events that the city sponsors and puts on for the public. We already do this. We already have been doing this, but this is an affirmative way to make it clear
that we are following what the law requires us to do. Both, some of it hasn't been completely codified at either the federal or the state level, but it has been incorporated through a number of other cases through the Ninth Circuit, which is the federal circuit of courts that we belong to. So this is basically a statement applicable to the city and how we treat people of both the gender identity or with sexual orientation that would not be discriminated against by the city in anything regarding employment or in any activities or events that we put on. So, any questions?
Questions? Seeing none, what's the council's wish on, in terms of advancing the ordinance or acting on the ordinance at this point?
Mr. President, I assume we bring this back as an ordinance next week?
Yes.
Great. That'd be a question.
Well, this hasn't changed from the previous draft that we've seen?
No, it is not.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Ms. Caton from my staff has made it a little bit cleaner in how she does, but yes, it's essentially the same thing you've
Kurt
seen.
Smith a little bit.
Yeah.
No further questions, or is it the wishes to advance?
Yes.
Next week?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll do that. That brings us to item 8, future meeting topics. Other than it's holiday season,
Happy Thanksgiving.
happy Thanksgiving to
Happy Thanksgiving,
everybody.
Scouts. Thanks for being here tonight.
And everybody in the audience. If there is no future topics, we.
Mr.
President?
President?
I bet we're going to do the same thing.
Maybe.
But I noticed we may have some special guests in the audience, and I was hoping maybe they could be introduced.
Well, I was gonna let David do that.
I appreciate that.
That was my question. And I apologize for them arriving late. But we have some guests in the audience. One of them is my wife of 31 wonderful years, Renee. I think many of you know her. Also, our cousin, Charlavana, and our friend, Harvey. I would point out that Charlavana's father, Floyd James, has had a pretty big influence on me. He was a city councilman of Compton, California for several terms through most of the 70s and the 80s, 1970s, 1980s. A very strong champion of economic development and very successful at that. He recently passed on, so we are missing him, I'm sorry to say. But also Charlavana's father, Floyd James, as I said, walked Renee down the aisle at our wedding. So he was a very special man to me, and I'm thrilled to have our cousin and our friend with us today, Charlavana and Harvey. And thank you for coming.
All right. Next issue,
Mr. President,
executive session. Mr. Byrd,
I move we go into executive session as per Idaho State Code 674,
Make sure you get 'em right.
206,